guys, good morning and thank you for tuning in once again. Today I'm going to be looking at price elasticity of demand. I've been looking at this with my GCSE students, but it would be equally applicable to those of you who are doing GCSE, AS level and even through to A2 level as well. So let's get straight in there and get stuck into price elasticity of demand. So price elasticity of demand, or PED as it's abbreviated to, what does it measure? Well, it measures the responsiveness of quantity demanded to, in this case, its determinant, which is the price. So elasticity is a measure of how a given variable responds to one of its determinants. So if it's price elasticity of demand, then we're measuring how the quantity demanded varies whenever the price varies. So the equation for calculating PED, as you can see, is percentage change in quantity demanded divided by the percentage change in the price. Now, whenever you calculate the PED, it always should be shown, unless it's very exceptional circumstances, it should always be shown as a minus value. So we stick a minus sign in front of that percentage change in QD divided by the percentage change in price. Why is that? Well, consider the slope and the shape of the demand curve. It slopes downwards from left to right, and therefore, if we take an example, let's say we work out a percentage change in price, we're going upwards in terms of the price level. Well, as price level rises, the quantity demanded will be going downwards, it will be falling, and so we have a reduction in quantity demanded, and so in effect we would have a minus over a plus to give us a minus. Alternatively, if we were working it back in the other direction, so with a fall in the price, we would then have an increase in the quantity demanded. So we'd have a minus over a plus, but again, that's still ultimately going to give us a minus number overall. So that is why we stick a minus sign over the actual answer. However, and this is where it does get slightly confusing, if you are presented in your exam with a PED value and it says the PED is equal to minus 2.0. Well, for the purposes of interpretation, you put your hand over the minus sign, you pretend it's not actually there in order to determine exactly how sensitive quantity demanded is to the change in price. Now, the nature of the sensitivity is determined by three terms. One of them being, we might say that the price elasticity of demand is elastic, we might say that the price elasticity of demand is inelastic, and we might say that the price elasticity of demand is unitary, or it may be somewhere in between these things. So when we're looking at the value of PED, if the value is greater than 1, then it is known as elastic price elasticity of demand. So this value, for example,
please come to reception. Thank you.
This value of minus 2.0, in effect we cover over the minus sign and we say that that is a PED value of 2, so that would be elastic. Now that means that the quantity demanded is very sensitive to price changes. If it's elastic, it means that the quantity demanded is very sensitive to price changes. So for example, that might mean that a very small change in price yields a very large increase in quantity demanded. That's the way to remember it, ladies and gentlemen. Small change in price, large change in quantity demanded, if the price elasticity of demand is very elastic. If, on the other hand, you're given a value and it's, let's say, minus 0.2, well, again, in our interpretation of this number, we would be covering over the minus sign and we say that is 0.2. That value is less than 1. Hence we say that is known as inelastic price elasticity of demand. And that means that quantity demanded is very insensitive to price changes. And so the way I like to remember this one is a very large change in price on the vertical axis yields a very small change in quantity demanded. And then finally, we've got a few special cases. So if you got a value which was equal to 1 or equal to -1, then that is known as unitary elasticity of demand. So any change in the price level is proportionately matched by a change in the quantity demanded. And in a video, maybe not this video, but maybe in the future, I'll come back to that unitary price elasticity of demand. Other special cases would be, or other extremes would be known as perfectly elastic demand. Now, if we have a perfectly elastic demand, it means that the demand curve is perfectly horizontal, like so. And so, you know, the gradient of this line, we're talking about infinity and beyond. And if it was perfectly inelastic, then it's a vertical curve like so, and the gradient of that line being 0. So those are the sort of general basic interpretations of price elasticity of demand. And I guess the key thing is, whenever you're presented with a number, always remember, basically, you know, you're not looking at the minus sign when you're assessing, is it elastic, is it inelastic, is it unitary? You're taking the minus sign away, and then you're interpreting what's in front of you. So now I just want to consider what the actual determinants are of price elasticity of demand. So what makes a good or service inelastic in the sense of price elasticity of demand? What makes it elastic in the sense of price elasticity of demand? So let me just move along here to one I've prepared earlier, as one might say. Make sure we're in focus. Excellent. Hi guys, back again. So here we have the determinants of price elasticity of demand. So what I've drawn here is an inelastic demand curve, which is very steep. And remember, we said if it's inelastic, if price elasticity of demand is inelastic, it means that a large change in price yields a very small change in the quantity demanded. And you can see that on this demand curve. So let's take, for example, cigarettes, tobacco products, which the government taxes quite heavily. So let's say the price of cigarettes is P1, and the government whops an enormous tax on them, and the price of tobacco products rises way up here to P2. So you can see we've got a very, on the y-axis here, we've got a very substantial, very significant increase in the price level, but a relatively small reduction in the quantity demanded. And so this is why we can say that when goods have a price elasticity of demand which is less than 1, i.e. inelastic, very large changes in price bring about very small changes in quantity demanded. And so let's think about the types of products which would have this type of price elasticity of demand. Number 1, necessities. Things which you've got to buy, like, for example, petrol, especially if you live in a rural area, for example, you know there are means of getting around. The basics of life, those simple bare necessities of life, anything like that, as the price of them rises, the quantity demanded won't be knocked off very much because they are necessities by nature. Secondly, habit-forming goods. My generation, your generation, probably not as addicted nowadays as they once were to smoking and tobacco products and so on, but people who do partake in tobacco products, those are habit-forming goods. They're not really necessities in the true sense of the word, but they'll still exhibit this type of price elasticity of demand, where very large changes in price bring about very small changes in quantity demanded. The proportion of your income that you spend on a good or service. Every day, I hope, ladies and gentlemen, you'll be buying a newspaper. If the newspaper goes up from 50 pence to 51 pence, that isn't going to stop you necessarily buying the newspaper. So it's dependent upon how much of your income is actually going into this good or service. Obviously, if it was fortunes, you'd be much more sensitive. And then finally, if there's nothing else, i.e. what we know in the business as substitute goods, if there are no other substitutes, no close substitutes, and the price of the product rises, well, you've just got to buy that particular product. And so, again, that would make the PED less than 1 and very inelastic. What about this elastic demand then? Highly sensitive to changes in price. So let's look at this one, for example, and just show you why that is. So we start at P1 and Q1, then we raise the price to P2, and the quantity demanded drops off to Q2. So we've got quite a significant drop off in quantity demanded and a relatively small change in price. So that is small change in price, large change in quantity demanded, makes it elastic. The PED is elastic. Now again, let's consider what types of goods would have that sort of characteristic. Well, we'll be talking about, up here we're talking about necessities. So here we'll be talking about luxury goods, foreign holidays. Think of the summertime, we get to June, July, people haven't booked any holidays, and the Thomas Cooks of this world then think, whoa, we've got to sell these holidays. What will we do? We will reduce the price. And the price might come down by maybe 5–10%, but that then does bring forward lots of holiday makers who think to themselves, tell you what, I'm going to have a holiday. And so the fall in the price brings about a very large change in quantity demanded for those luxury items. And secondly, if you've got large numbers of substitute goods, well, price changes then become very, very sensitive. Because if you consider, let's take Tesco, Asda, Aldi, Lidl's, etc., all of these supermarchés, well, they're all in competition with one another. When one of them reduces their prices, even by a small amount, over a range of products, lots of people will switch because they're highly price sensitive. They think to themselves, well, this is too expensive, I can get exactly the same good over here for less money, so I'll go to the alternative supermarket. And so where you've got large numbers, very large numbers of close substitutes, that means that the PED will be greater than 1, and hence that is known as elastic demand. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to stop it there. I'm going to come back to this again just to talk about how to interpret price elasticity of demand values in an exam, and to relate PED, price elasticity of demand, to total revenue and how that applies to business. It's a very common question on exam papers. So see you again soon for that. Thanks for watching and keep subscribing. Thank you.